cryptocurrencies are certainly much bigger than Bitcoin, and so you think about Bitcoin, and it is approaching a currency. But the big thing that we're doing today is holding a roundtable with a lot of industry leaders coming in and getting ideas so that we don't start legislating before we start listening. And so I'm fairly new to Congress. I've been in manufacturing, and generally you try to gather as much input as you can to launch good products. And that's certainly what we want to do with this piece of legislation. There's a lot of uncertainty out there, and frankly, the people that want to be able to do those things, like ETFs, like turn commodities into securities, trade futures on markets, need some sort of certainty, and they need the credibility that legislation brings to prevent fraud.
Is this about legislation, or is this about the SEC taking a more progressive policy, if you will? Why do you think the SEC has not allowed any of these financial instruments to hit the markets just yet?
Well, I think they're still wrestling with it, and one of the concerns early on, really, when we were looking at the timeline on when we were going to launch this roundtable, is Director Clayton mentioning that virtually everything looks like a security to him. And then there's this Howey test, which goes back to a court case where involving citrus growers, where everything starts looking like a security. And there's this thing called a utility token, which is really important to get at. Is that a security, or is that something else more akin to a prepaid card? Right. Although it does have a risk that the value would change. Can it be traded? And so a lot of folks in the industry have found a way to raise capital that eliminates a lot of intermediaries, that isn't selling shares of a company. So if you think about Apple, when they were launching iCloud, for example, let's say they decided to do that through utility tokens, and they had, 1 terabyte equals 1 token. Would you be owning part of Apple? Well, I don't think so, but some people feel like, well, no, it's a security, and it has to be regulated as if they're selling shares. So we're going to have that dialogue today. How
do you ultimately deal with what might be described as the biggest thorn, I would suggest, which is the custody issue? Which is to say, the idea that a Bitcoin, or frankly, most of these cryptocurrencies, if one of them gets stolen from me, or if I send it accidentally, or whatever, that it is gone, and there is really no way to meaningfully track it, and that so much of this world is being used, unfortunately, to launder money and for other illicit uses.
Yeah, I don't want to dismiss the fact that there's illicit uses, but when cash goes away, cash is gone. When a cryptocurrency is moved, it's inherently traceable. There's a distributed ledger, it's a public ledger, so there's really the only anonymity is at the point of entry. Right. Once you've entered the market.
By the way, that's why it's being used illicitly, and clearly, unlike cash, it can be used much more efficiently. Which is to say, it's one thing to put it in a briefcase and get it in an airplane. It's another thing to be able to transfer it across the world within less, milliseconds.
Yeah, absolutely. In that sense, it's like anything else that's traded in the market. You have the similar risks for fraud with the market in terms of shares or any other commodity that's publicly traded.
You think it's the same?
Well, I think some of them are the same, and I think that's the thing. Right now, everything's been kind of sloppy with our language. We call everything a cryptocurrency. The reality is we've got crypto securities, crypto commodities, and I believe there's this third thing called currently described as a utility token, but a crypto asset that's more generic. And when the Swiss created regulatory certainty there, they recognized that third asset class. And I think it's going to be very useful for a whole range of companies, not even digital companies, real estate, titles, you name it. That's the platform Ethereum created to be able to facilitate efficient transactions, and frankly, it'll eliminate a lot of underwriting costs.
Right. Congressman, disclosure question: Do you own any cryptocurrency?
I do not.
You do you want to own some cryptocurrency?
I would love to, and I feel like in a lot of ways I'm missing out on a great market, but I feel like it would be inappropriate for me to be making these investments right now as I'm writing or working to write this legislation.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah.